Okay, I am well rested and back in the saddle. So today, I finished all the other things, but today I'm going to do just a special focus topic. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the account of the Nativity, which is only covered in Matthew and Luke. Okay, there are four gospel accounts, and Mark doesn't have it. He just starts like with when Jesus is an adult, and John as well. So, and John even goes back to beyond that, like he taps into the fact that Jesus is eternal and was from the before the beginning, or however you want to phrase that. But he goes in that direction. So he doesn't include the birth account, but Matthew and Luke have it. And so what I did, I went over both and made, extensive notes about everything, and I'm just going to go over that in a way of showing certain things along the way. Now, I have done this with other things in the Gospels. There's a lot of talk about different things about the Gospel accounts. Like some people say that there are a lot of discrepancies and that kind of thing. And then they'll say that, or contradictions or whatever they want to call it. And if you reconcile it all together, it fits pretty well enough at least. So, people will argue about how many times the rooster crowed. And, there are things that are like one guy will include a certain detail that the other guy won't include. And then they'll say, oh, and it's okay. Like I would just say, well, both things were there. Like were there two angels or one angel at the resurrection, that kind of thing. Like I would say, yeah, both were there. And sometimes it's like one just includes both of them, and one just remembers the fact that angelic presence was there, and they mention an angel and they don't get specific about it. But and people have to keep in mind this recording was done by humans. Okay, it was done by humans, but it's the Bible is, like people will say, okay, it is the Word of God, and other people say it contains the Word of God. And in a way, both are true, but there are things I, have pointed out along the way. If you've been watching videos for any amount of time, there are little things, like I said, even Bible translations that they'll corrupt, that will become corrupted. Or one translation includes this word and the other one doesn't, or a whole verse will be missing. It's not that this is impossible, okay? And I know some people would just scream and fall off their horse if they heard that, but that's the reality, okay? I have been looking at these things for a long time, and it's not going to shake the foundation of my faith at all, okay? I have too much evidence, all right? But I'm just trying to say there are little things, like, for instance, it's Matthew 27 where Judas betrays Jesus for the 30 pieces of silver, and the person recording it mentions Jeremiah, I think 32, and there is something in Jeremiah 32, but then it goes on about pricing him at 30 pieces of silver, but that part is actually in Zechariah. It's in a certain place in Zechariah and not in Jeremiah. So, somebody could point the finger and say, "Ooh, that's a mistake. I found an error in it." And it's like I said, I mean, this was a human accounting, and even for the sake of that, it's pretty good. I mean, it's accurate enough, and there is more accuracy and evidence historically that holds up water with the Bible than with all these other secular accounts of history and other things like that they'll hold to, you know, put together. And there have been scholars that have talked about that. So, I mean, that's something you can look up on YouTube or Google or whatever and research that, and you'll see, okay, that's what it is. But there are always going to be people who uh, they want to be a skeptic because they want to be a skeptic no matter what, and that's it. It's like no matter how much proof there is of this, they still refuse to believe. And it's not because of the data one way or the other. It's because they don't want that to be the truth, because they, like Jesus said, they want to stay in their sin. They don't want to come into the light. It's a spiritual thing. It's not an intellectual thing. And so that's just how it is. You can have that go either way. If a person wants or doesn't want something to be the case, they go based on what they want, and then they kind of pack all the evidence in around that viewpoint. But there's definitely more than enough here for this to say, yes, this is true. Okay, but yeah, it's just a spiritual issue. It's a hardness of heart. It's that kind of thing that they want to believe a certain way about a thing, and that's it. And there have been scholars in the past researching things about this, and they were dead set that this wasn't the case, and they were going to disprove something. And they found enough evidence that they actually ended up becoming Christians, that this was the truth. So that's how it is if you are willing to really look the truth in the eye, okay, and not hide behind all kinds of claims. I have heard so many claims about, against, oh, this can't be because of this or that, or this and that don't go together or whatever. And, it all doesn't hold water. I mean, there are claims about like contradictions. And I mean, I'm not talking about the rooster crowed this many times, or Peter denied that 3 times, and it was 1 time or 2 times that the rooster crowed. I don't mean that. I mean, like I said, but I talked about how that goes, and I'll talk about it more. But I mean serious things. And I've read the Bible, many, many times, and I can say there are not contradictions like ideological contradictions or anything like that. And I mean, I have the understanding from the Holy Spirit, and it just, you have more of a perspective on things and how they go together, how it interconnects. And somebody else who doesn't have that, they won't see that, so they'll think there's a problem when there isn't. So, okay, anyway, but that's the deal with that. Now, I'm going to do a timeline for this one, but I'm just going to first go over what is here. So with Matthew and Luke, now here with Matthew, it's included, we have Matthew chapter 1, and it goes from verses 18 till 25. And we have, I'm not going to read every little thing. I'll just put it here. You can read it. I'm just going to kind of summarize what's going on. So in 18, we have, Mary is betrothed, which is engaged to Joseph. And it's revealed that the child will be conceived by the Holy Spirit. So that part and all this is there. So we have that, and then Joseph has a dream that it's okay, that's what's happening, and you can take Mary as your wife, and an angel appears and tells him that. So they get married, but they don't physically come together, as they say. They have ways of describing that, until after the birth of Jesus. And there's a whole thing about that, and they have to wait a certain period of time, and that's coming up. Okay, that will come up later. Now, in 2, it pretty much goes from verse 1 all the way through to about verse 23. So we have Jesus is born in Bethlehem, and then it goes to the wise men coming from the east. Then in 2 through 8, we have Herod plotting to kill the child. All right. And then I'll turn the page. Oh. And then 9 through 11, we have the wise men come to Jesus, and as he is a young child at that point. Okay, so I'll get back to that thing. And then 12, they're warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, so the wise men leave another way back to their homeland. And then in 13, an angel warns Joseph in a dream to take Mary and Jesus and flee to Egypt to escape what's going to happen there. So 14 is the flight to Egypt, and then in 15 they remain in Egypt until after Herod's death. And in 16 it mentions how the children, the babies, 2 years old and under, were killed by Herod. And then we have the prophecy about this, 19 through 23, and that is the end of chapter 2. Yeah, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus go back to Israel, and then they were first going to resettle in Judea, and then they go down to, or up, I should say, to Galilee and Nazareth. So that's the summary of it in Matthew, and now I'll go over to Luke. And do the same thing here. Okay, so with Luke, the first part is just a little intro, but then in verse 5, so Luke 1, okay, verse 5 to verse 20 is about Zacharias and Elizabeth and the whole story there, and how John the Baptist's birth was announced by an angel to Zacharias, and then he goes mute until the birth of the baby, all this stuff that happens. And so, this is going on through verse 20. And again, I won't reread everything. It's here. If you want to freeze the page and read it again, or in your own Bible, then that's fine. And here. So then, in 21 through 25, we have Elizabeth does conceive John the Baptist. In verse 26, Elizabeth is 6 months pregnant with John the Baptist, and that's when the angel Gabriel is sent to the Virgin Mary, who happens to be betrothed to Joseph. Okay, and that's where here in this part the conception and birth of Jesus are announced to Mary. All right, so we have that account here. And she, is engaged to Joseph. And then again, the birth is announced and it's explained, like the details of the conception and everything are explained to her. Like, she's a virgin and it's going to be like that. So that goes on. Through there, it prophesies, the angel gives the prophecy, of how Jesus, all this about Jesus and how it's going to happen. So, all right. Yeah, this goes on till 38, how it's going to be with the conception. And then the angel reveals what happened with Elizabeth here. Like, she conceived in her old age, and now she's 6 months pregnant. And so there's that. And then, okay, in 39 to 45, Mary, it says, with haste goes right away up to visit Elizabeth, who's in Judea. Okay, so she goes there, and then there's that encounter, And then after that, we have the Song of Mary. Okay, that's 46 to 55. Did I get it all? Okay, here to 55. And then in 56, it has Mary stayed with Elizabeth there for 3 months. So by that time, Elizabeth would have been 9 months pregnant and delivered the baby. So it would make sense that she would have stayed with her to see the birth of the baby, and then go back. Okay, so that makes sense. In 57 to 58, John the Baptist is born. All right, and let's see. Oh, and it also mentions Elizabeth, where it says, Elizabeth, your relative. That's in verse 36. So Elizabeth and Mary are relatives. So, sorry. Anyway, all right, and then John the Baptist is born. 59 to 66 here is the circumcision of John the Baptist. And then 67 to 79 is where Zacharias does the prophecy. It's almost like his little song too, he does this prophecy about John the Baptist, and there's a little bit about Jesus in there. So there's that. And then in 80, it just has John grows up and, he's strong in spirit and all that. So, okay. Now, already so far, I mean, you see that Luke, and there's way more, but Luke has these details about, Zacharias, Elizabeth, and John the Baptist. And Matthew doesn't have that. He just, he jumps right in, and you'll see it's more abbreviated than this is as we go through. It's all of chapter 2 as well. So that's okay. Like, Luke just included more detail than Matthew. And then the skeptics will try to argue and say, oh, well, like they'll use symbols, like this one has A and that one has B. And then Christians will say, well, it's A plus B. And, they'll be like, no, it's not. And I mean, yes, it is. In one case, they don't include A, and the other guy does include A. Like here, that's okay. A is still true. I mean, it doesn't mean every guy has to include the whole account of John the Baptist's birth. Okay, Mark doesn't even include the account of the birth of Jesus. And obviously, it's still true. Okay, so they just focus on different things, and that's not a contradiction. So this is the case with everything in here in the Gospels. Like, they all work together that way, and you can do the same thing with all of them. I'm just choosing to do it with this. Okay, but all right, so now I'll just move on here. Chapter 2 here. 2 has, okay, verses 1 to 3 is where they bring in the census. Okay, who is this guy? Augustus. He wants to do the census thing where everybody gets registered. All right, and this can also be verified. All right, so there's evidence for all of it. Okay, so now the census happens, and then in 4, Joseph has to go up to Bethlehem because of this, because that's where his lineage is from. He's from the line of King David, and so is Mary. So they both actually, and of course they'll go together, but they both have to go to Bethlehem as a result of all that to get registered there. Okay, so this is what happens there. And then in verse 5, so it's just he goes up with Mary, who's pregnant, and they're betrothed. Okay, and then in 6 to 7, it just has the account of, let me move this around. All right, where Jesus is born there, because her due date came, and anyway, so she gives birth in Bethlehem and delivers Jesus there. And that's what the prophecy said would happen. And by the way, when she was visiting Elizabeth, so Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant when she got there. So if Mary conceived Jesus while she was up there in Judea visiting Elizabeth, which would make sense to me, because I don't know, I just think, that's closer to Jerusalem and that whole area. Like, that's more considered a holy place than the North Country. And I don't know, I just have a feeling that that's where this happened. Not that it couldn't happen somewhere else, but it just seems more appropriate somehow. Anyway, and if that happened then John the Baptist would be 6 months older for sure, at least, maybe more if this happened later, because she was there 3 months and then went back. So it could have happened later, but I don't think it was much later, because there was only so much time, and then they had to go up here. So she delivered back at this time when they went up there. So there are no time details given on that, but it all happened within a short time frame. I've heard that their engagements were a year in this way. So anyway, well, the time comes, she's 9 months pregnant, and I'm thinking that John the Baptist was 6 months older than Jesus, about. So, okay, she gives birth in Bethlehem, And while they're up there, and that's supposed to be to fulfill prophecy, like it says he'll be born in Bethlehem. So this is all that about, yeah, Jesus is born in Bethlehem in verses 6 to 7, laid in a manger. And then verses 8 to 20 is where this whole thing comes along, where the birth of Jesus is revealed to the shepherds by the angel. And then they want to go and visit the baby. So they do. They go and visit the baby and find everything just like the angel said, you know. So there's that account. Okay. And this also, it wasn't in Matthew. So he just has way more detail. Okay, now 21 is where Jesus is circumcised on the 8th day. Okay, so he's born, and this is their law. Okay, that so 8 days later, on the 8th day, the baby, the male baby, of course, is circumcised. So that's what happened. So I mean, this was done in the temple, and there are more details here that I'll get to, but they were doing all these things. They had to be there to do these things. Okay, so they were fulfilling the requirements of the law for the birth of a male child, okay, in the land of Israel. So there are certain things involved, and that's what they were doing. Okay, so okay, 21. All right, and then in verse 22, it says, I'll just read this part now. When the days of her purification according to the law of Moses were completed, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male who opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Lord. And then it has a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Now, I'll get back to that, but the reference for that is Leviticus 12, verse 8. And if you read it, it actually has a larger animal. I forgot if it was a lamb, but I'm not going to run over there right now, but it's a larger animal. And then if they can't afford that, then they do the birds, the turtle doves or pigeons, see? And that's what they did. So that's a little clue that they were more on the poor side and not rich, okay? So just mentioning that, there's more to it than the birds. So if you read over there in Leviticus, you'll see. Okay, now coming back to this part, this reference goes back to Exodus chapter 13, and it mentions here verse 2, 12, and 15. So I look back there, and it turns out, there is a whole list of ceremonial stuff that the woman would go through. So if she gave birth to a male child, she had her days of purification were 33 days. It looks like from birth, not from the circumcision, days of purification. And if it's a female, it turns out to be twice as long. I don't know if there is some biological thing behind this or not, but that's what it had. So obviously, since it's a male, this would have been 33 days. So for 33 days, they're days of purification, and I guess she just stays home, And after that, they bring the baby with the offering to dedicate him to the Lord at the temple. And I guess it's just a firstborn. So if it's a male, it's this number of days, and if it's a female, it's that number of days. So that's all I found on that. But so this would have been 33 days. till this would have happened. So then we have a little over a month there, okay? So they had to be there to fulfill this. I mean, they, of course, were, you know, fulfilling the things that were in there, and that's, of course, what Jesus did, you know. Now we're under the new covenant, but I'm just saying, like, they would have done this, of course, you know. Just like it said, Elizabeth and Zacharias, they were doing what they, you know, were told to do at that time. It would make sense that, you know, of course, they would be that type, okay? Okay, so all of them here. So that was it. Then, so that's the 33-day thing for the days of purification that would have happened for Mary here. Okay, and then, yeah, at 24, they go to the temple, Jesus is presented, all that. And then 25 to 35, you have this guy named Simon. And, you know, it explains all this too. And he has a prophecy about Jesus. All right, and that goes all the way through to 35, just the details of that. Right after that, in 36 to 38, we have the same thing with a woman named Anna, the widow Anna, and she kind of has the same situation where it's revealed to both of them that this is the deliverer, the redeemer, and they have sort of a prophecy thing about it. Okay, so that's till 38. And then here it just jumps to this, that they performed all those things according to the law, and then they did, you know, as I said, and then it just jumps right into going to Nazareth in Galilee, and then the child grew and all that, and then that part ends, okay. And so here it begins with Jesus as a boy and the things that happened from that time on, you know, where he goes in the temple and discusses things with the religious leaders as a boy. But so, you know, some people would say, oh, but, you know, this includes this and that includes that. So here, like, I want to put this all in like a timeline. I'll try to make it a kind of a abbreviated version of this, but okay. So let me zoom this out a little. Okay, so here we have a timeline, okay, and so we have in Matthew, Mary betrothed to Joseph, so that would be way out here. I'll just put Mary and Joseph like this. Go put a little heart. Okay. Then she conceives. I'll put this more over here. Conception. I'll just abbreviate that. Conception of Jesus. Okay. All right. And then Joseph has the dream to take Mary as his wife, okay, from the angel, the message from the angel. So that would have been like around here. I'll just say Joseph's dream. Oops. Okay. All right. Then he marries Mary, and they didn't unite, you know, physically consummate the marriage or whatever until after the birth of Jesus. So they get married here, around here, you know. Or no, I should put this over here. I think, yeah, because they got married later. I guess, I mean, you know, yeah, because she's still engaged, and then she conceives Jesus. and then they get married. Okay. All right, so this is here. All right. And then here we have Jesus is born in Bethlehem. I'll just abbreviate that. Okay. And then I'll come back to that in a bit. All right, then let me do Luke now. Now, okay, with Luke, as I said, chapter 1, 5 to 20, it's all the stuff about Zacharias and Elizabeth and the birth of John the Baptist announced. Elizabeth conceives John the Baptist, and that's a normal conception between those two, okay? So 5 to 25 would be like out here, okay? And it's before this, so it's out there, and I wouldn't even, I'll just say it's out here, okay? All right. So Elizabeth conceives. Elizabeth is 6 months pregnant, and that's when I'll just make this when the angel announces, I'll just say announcement to Mary that Jesus is going to come through her. Okay, so that's the angel announcement. Here she conceives. So there's that time in between. Okay. Yeah. And then birth of Jesus announced. Okay, details of prophecy. So these are just a lot of extra details. Details of conception. That's all what the angel is telling her all the way through, I guess it's verse 29 through 38. Okay. In 39 to 45 in Luke 1, Mary goes right away to visit Elizabeth. So this would be here. Right after this, Mary goes to visit Elizabeth. Okay. All right. Then we have the Song of Mary, which happens when she's there. Mary stays 3 months. Elizabeth, till she would give birth, I would think. So she's here, and I'm thinking, it's over this time. Okay, circumcision of John the Baptist. Okay, the prophecy about him. John grows up. So, okay, that comes later, of course. So that all that's here. And then Mary goes back. She goes back up to Nazareth. Marries Joseph. Okay, so that would be there. All right, then in Luke 2, we have the census. That would be here, because then they go up there. So they go to Bethlehem. And then she gives birth to Jesus in Bethlehem. Okay. Yeah, so Mary and Joseph go up to Bethlehem. She's pregnant 9 months. Gives birth here. All right, this thing we have. Then we have the angels appear to the shepherds. I'll just abbreviate that. And then they come, and this is like the same day, but I just want to, not have it too crowded. So, okay, all this we have, the baby's born, manger, all that is here. Then the angels appear to the shepherds. That's here. Okay, they visit. Okay, and then we have all this about, I'll just say, the temple. Okay, so he's circumcised on the 8th day. And then on the 33rd day or so, whatever that would be, they go up to the temple to dedicate or offer Jesus to the Lord. The way they would do that. And like I said, they bring the turtle doves or the pigeons and all this. So this is here. Okay, so this is just like a month later from here, 33 days. And that's when you have the same day Simon's prophecy, Anna's prophecy. All these things happen right here. Okay, they completed all the requirements. That's when they're there in that area. I don't know for how long, because in Luke, I guess I forgot now if it's Luke or Matthew, but it mentions, I didn't write this detail down, but it mentions that, must have been Matthew, where they're in Judea. Okay, so they're in Judea, and it talks about Jesus as a young child, and they're in a house, and that's when the wise men from the east come. Okay, so that, I'll put it here, wise men, which Luke doesn't include this detail, wise men from east. They come and they bring the frankincense and the myrrh and the gold, that. Okay, so they come here. This is Judea. That's what it says. It's in Judea. So they're there a little while, okay? I don't know how long. And then all that stuff happens. Let me go back to that page. Yeah, that's okay. It's coming back to this. So that's when wise men from the east, and then Herod plots to kill the child. Okay, so that's when, all that happens with the angel warning them to go back another way and everything. And then by the time Herod finds out that the wise men fooled him and left and didn't come back and tell him anything, that's when he loses it, and he orders all the babies 2 years old and under. Okay, so there's a reason for why it's 2 years old and under to be killed, because he wants to make sure he includes Jesus in this, and he doesn't know which one it is, so he wants to kill all of them. So all the babies in that area, that around Bethlehem, the greater Bethlehem area, he has them murdered. Okay, so that would be, well, I'll just put a dot for that. Herod and the 2-year-old babies. Okay, 2-year-olds. Okay, so before this happens, this is where the angel comes in a dream to Joseph to go to Egypt, to, flee. So they go to Egypt. They flee by night to Egypt to escape that. He doesn't know, Herod doesn't know this, of course. He thinks everybody's still there. And then he orders this done. So it's all the, babies or toddlers 2 years old and under that get murdered in that area, okay? So that goes on then. And they're still there. They're in Egypt. And then until after Herod's death, then they come back. Okay, so they come back from Egypt. All right. And then they were going to go back to Judea where they were, but then Joseph is, I guess, I don't know if he's warned, I forgot, or if he just doesn't feel right about it, and he goes back to where they were before in Nazareth in Galilee. So back to Galilee, Nazareth. Okay, so that's here. They go back there, and then Jesus grows up here, and onward it goes. So, I mean, this is where it all falls into place. And as I said, this all happened. It's just a matter of when it happened, and it had to be this way, and one includes this detail and the other includes that detail, and that's okay. Okay, so that's how it all just comes together here. So yeah, okay, so I have everything from these notes. Okay, so that's that's it for the timeline. As I said, I just want to, it's probably long already. I just want to keep this short as I can. But, you know, one more thing I was going to say about, so this is just a nativity account, like how that comes together. And you can do this with any of the events in the Gospels, and, it's fine, like it works. But one thing I will say is, for people out there who want to get picky about the little things like how many times the rooster crowed or how many angels there were, and they think they're so, clever. I would say to these skeptics, okay, I have an assignment for you. Okay, you could tell I used to be a teacher, huh? Well, I still am. Okay, I have a little assignment for you. Okay, I would tell them, let's say, just take one guy for instance. I'd bring this guy, tell him, come up to the front. And then I'd hand him his homework assignment. All right, so I would tell him, okay, here, your assignment is this. Okay, pick a movie, any movie that, yeah, I don't want to, start naming movies because I can't recommend very many things, but, whatever, tell them I would tell them, pick your favorite movie, whatever it is, you pick it. And pull out among your group, okay, at least 4 friends of yours, maybe more, okay, and sit them down. You guys all sit in your living room, and you give each one of them a spiral notebook and a pen, and you send each one of them to the movie, but in separate theaters, okay? So his friend Zach can go to the movie theater on that end of town, and his friend Bob to the one on the other end of town, and Al can go to the movie theater that's in the next town, and whatever. His friend Nat can go to the movie theater way over there on this other town, and so on. So each one of his friends is in a separate theater, and they're not communicating with one another. Okay, you can't compare anything, you can't discuss anything. You each go to a movie, the same movie, separately, okay? And it doesn't matter the timing as long as it's the movie still out and it's the same movie. Okay, so they all go to one and the same movie, and you tell each one to take notes, as many notes as they possibly can about the movie. What happened? What's the plot? What did the main character do? All that stuff. Take notes. And then when you come out of the movie, go home, don't talk to anybody, and go over it again. Go over your memory. Did you forget anything? Did you leave out any details? Add as much as you can remember into it, okay? When you're done, take a day to do that, let's say, and then when they're all done, maybe give them a week or something to get this assignment done. And then they're not allowed to talk to one another, okay? And then a week later, you all meet at your house, that guy who, sent them out, okay? They all meet at his house again. And they all compare notes, okay? I'm willing to bet my sweet savings, okay, that they're not going to be identical accounts. Even though they watched an identical movie, they all saw the same movie, okay? But each one is going to pay attention to different details. They're going to notice different things. They're going to maybe get a little something. Whoops, they missed that. Or, oh, it was 2 friends and not one who came over, whatever. It's not going to be exact. They're not going to be identical. And, it's the same movie. Okay, the movie still happened. The movie is still true in the sense of, even if it's fiction, that was the movie, okay? So just because of that, it doesn't mean that the movie now would never happened. You know what I mean? It's like it still was that movie. So that was the story anyway, whether they noticed it all or not. They're human beings, and that's how that works, okay? It's not identical. And they're going to, maybe when they compare notes, one will say, oh, yeah, you're right, it was this way, and I left that out, okay, But that's how it works. So, if, so that's just reality of life, okay? Try it and you'll see. And it's kind of funny. It would be a fun experiment. Now, if all the gospel accounts or any other thing like that, what I said, anything like that would be identical, the 4 accounts or more would all be identical. Every detail would be identical. Then they would be suspicious that something is wrong here. That's too perfect. That's suspicious. They got together and copied each other. That can't be, with human imperfection and all that in the world. That's not going to happen. And then they would complain about that. So either way, like I said, they'll find something just because they want to, whether it's there or not. There's no valid reason, but they will use that as an excuse. So anyway, there's more I could say, a whole lot, but this is just an idea of, the kind of thing, and give an example of all this. So that's it for this video. Okay, I'm at 51. Yeah. Okay, so that's the video. And the next video will be on a very different topic. Okay, so take the advice and be blessed.